Okay, welcome everyone. We are going to start a new book today. Many lives, many masters. Unfortunately, my copy of the book has disappeared, so we'll be doing it. I'll also be reading it from the PDF only, but we've got the PDF, so we will start reading it through the PDF. Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss.
I know that there is a reason for everything. Perhaps at the moment that an event occurs, we have neither the insight nor the foresight to comprehend the reason, but with time and patience, it will come to light.
So definitely right. Everything what we've understood, even when we are going into higher states of consciousness, that everything is happening for a reason. Nothing happens just for the heck of it. There's a major plan which is there behind everything. This is also true according to the chaos theory, where they found that when things are in chaos, when they look deeper down into the chaos, they always found order within the chaos, right? So there's always something which is there, which actually results in whatever is happening.
So it was with Catherine. I met her in 1980 when she was 27 years old. She had come to my office seeking help for her anxiety, panic attacks, and phobias. Although these symptoms had been with her since childhood, in the recent past they had become much worse. Every day she found herself more emotionally paralyzed and less able to function. She was terrified and understandably depressed.
So a candidate with depression. So he's a psychotherapist, right? So naturally, people like this only will be coming to him for treatment.
In contrast to the chaos that was going on in her life at that time, my life was flowing smoothly. I had a good, stable marriage, two young children, and a flourishing career. From the beginning, my life seemed always to have been on a straight course. I had grown up in a loving home. Academic success had come easily, and by my sophomore year in college, I had made the decision to become a psychiatrist. I was graduated Phi Beta Kappa, magna cum laude, from Columbia University in New York in 1966. I then went to the Yale University School of Medicine and received my MD. In 1970, following an internship at the New York University Bellevue Medical Center, I returned to Yale to complete my residency in psychiatry. Upon completion, I accepted a faculty position at the University of Pittsburgh. 2 years later, I joined the faculty of the University of Miami, heading the psychopharmacology division. There, I achieved national recognition in the fields of biological psychiatry and substance abuse. After 4 years at the university, I was promoted to the rank of Associate Professor of Psychiatry at the medical school, and I was appointed Chief of Psychiatry at a large university affiliated hospital in Miami. By that time, I had already published 37 scientific papers and book chapters in my life. Years of disciplined study had trained my mind to think as a scientist and physician, molding me along the narrow paths of conservatism in my profession. I distrusted anything that could not be proved by traditional scientific methods. I was aware of some of the studies in parapsychology that were being conducted at major universities across the country, but they did not hold my attention. It all seemed too far fetched to me.
So
Then I
what also happens, that many times we come into things with blinkers in the eyes. We just don't want to see things that we don't want to see, right? Now that becomes like, ostrich with the head in the sand. So we have to open ourselves up to experiencing more things, to allowing more things to seep into our system. When we become closed, then we miss out on a lot of stuff that may be happening around us. And this happens to a lot of doctors also, especially allopathic doctors. I don't know if any doctors are here today, but definitely, with allopathic doctors, they don't want to look at anything alternative. They just want to be with the chemical medication. Although definitely it helps, to get into other fields also while you're doing a treatment or healing for a particular person.
Then I met Catherine. For 18 months, I used conventional methods of therapy to help her overcome her symptoms. When nothing seemed to work, I tried hypnosis. In a series of trance states, Catherine recalled past life memories that proved to be the causative factors of her symptoms. She
So now this
also
is important, right? Like now what we are looking at over here, when we are going into the higher states of consciousness again, we find that everything is happening at the same time, especially when we go into focus 15, where you can access any of your past lives. So what that implies is that everything is happening at the same time. Nothing is happening, at any different time. The way we focus our attention, that is where we will be. Now, when we are experiencing, let's say there are 2 timelines or 3 timelines or 10 timelines, if we as a personality have experienced something in one timeline, a resonant frequency can be created in another time. So now when we experience this or we pay attention to this timeline and where the problem was created over here, it can sort out the problem in this timeline. Okay, so that's how past life regression works. When you're going into past life regression, something which is getting triggered off in your current life where you are focusing your attention has a connection with another life. When you understand it in that life, this life also gets rectified.
She also was able to act as a conduit for information from highly evolved spirit entities, and through them she revealed many of the secrets of life and of death. In just a few short months, her symptoms disappeared and she resumed her life, happier and more at peace than ever before.
So again, when we are going into altered states, we can become a channel. We can actually start channeling from other entities, right? And this is something that we actually experience. We actually hear a recording in the Gateway Voyage where an entity is actually speaking from the voice box of one of the explorers, the group of people that developed with when Robert Monroe published his book, and they started exploring these altered states of consciousness, which ultimately resulted in most of the programs getting created. So you actually can hear these recordings where someone else is speaking from the voice box of one of the explorers.
Nothing in my background had prepared me for this. I was absolutely amazed when these events unfolded. I do not have a scientific explanation for what happened. There is far too much about the human mind that is beyond our comprehension. Perhaps under hypnosis, Catherine was able to focus in on the part of her subconscious mind that stored actual past life memories, or perhaps she had tapped into what the psychoanalyst Carl Jung termed the collective unconscious, the energy source that surrounds us and contains the memories of the entire human race.
So again, the collective unconscious. So this is a collective memory bank. You could also call it the morphogenic field, which was a term coined by Rupert Sheldrake, which talks about, that all the stuff that has been happening is recorded in the field. And if you can tap into the field, you can download any kind of information and data that you are looking for. So when a person is going into an altered state, it is absolutely possible to tap into the collective unconscious or into the morphogenic field.
Scientists are beginning to seek these answers. We as a society have much to gain from research into the mysteries of the mind, the soul, the continuation of life after death, and the influence of our past life experiences on our present behavior. Obviously, the ramifications are limitless, particularly in the fields of medicine, psychiatry, theology, and philosophy.
So this is very important, right? We are a sum total of all our experiences. Now, if we have experienced something in another timeline, or over here they're calling it the past life, that will have a resonance on what we are experiencing today. For example, whatever you experience as a child has a resonance when you are growing up. And this is something, again, we are finding in biofield tuning, that a lot of stuff happens from the age of 1 to 6, which actually has a very serious bearing on what you're doing as an adult. So what makes us think that something which happened in another lifetime, which we have a resonance with, would not have an influence in our current the current life that we are actually focusing our attention on and are living it out.
However, scientifically rigorous research in this area is in its infancy. Strides are being made to uncover this information, but the process is slow and is met with much resistance by scientists and lay people alike.
So again, so anything that cannot be proved, you can't hold in your hand, it becomes difficult for anyone, and especially the scientific community, to understand, right? Because most of the scientific community is still operating in the Newtonian process, right? They've not transcended even into the theory of relativity or quantum physics, because all these things that we are going to be talking about and we have been talking about are more related to quantum physics than to Newtonian physics. So naturally, if something is happening in the mind and you're going into a past life and all that stuff, first, there's no way to prove in a physical form that, okay, this is happening. Although using biofeedback technology, using mapping of the brainwave patterns, what is happening, it is slightly possible. But again, that is also in the air. You don't have substantial data to prove any of all this.
Throughout history, humankind has been resistant to change and to the acceptance of new ideas. Historical lore is replete with examples. When Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter, the astronomers of that time refused to accept or even to look at these satellites because the existence of these moons conflicted with their accepted beliefs.
So again, very important here, right? When we are holding a belief, again, Robert Monroe talks about the box that we exist in, our belief systems, our worldview, whatever we are actually, engaged with, we are invested in a particular idea. To shift that idea takes a lot, right? So any new paradigm which comes in, it takes a lot for people to accept it.
So it is now with psychiatrists and other therapists who refuse to examine and evaluate the considerable evidence being gathered about survival after bodily death and about past life memories. Their eyes stay tightly shut.
So
This book
absolutely. So again, past life, and there's a lot of evidence now. Young children have started to actually say that I was here. They're taken to a place and they talk about it. When they go into the place, they talk as if they were the grandfather, and they start ordering people around. They know exactly where what was, etc., etc. So definitely, there is a lot of evidence that there is a connection between this life and other lives that we have actually lived in.
This book is my small contribution to the ongoing research in the field of parapsychology, especially the branch dealing with our experiences before birth and after death. Every word that you will be reading is true. I have added nothing, and I have deleted only those parts that were repetitious. I have slightly changed Catherine's identity to ensure confidentiality. It took me 4 years to write about what happened. 4 years to garner the courage to take the professional risk of revealing this unorthodox information. Suddenly, one night, while I was taking a shower, I felt compelled to put this experience down on paper. I had a strong feeling that the time was right, that I should not withhold the information any longer. The lessons I had learned were meant to be shared with others, not to be kept private. The knowledge had come through Catherine and now had to come through me. I knew that no possible consequence I might face could prove to be as devastating as not sharing the knowledge I had gained about immortality and the true meaning of life.
So again, always in a quandary, right? When someone discovers something new, whether to put it out or not put it out, because many times people get orchestrated from the society or from that particular profession for saying something that doesn't concur with the worldview at that point in time.
I rushed out of the shower and sat down at my desk with the stack of audio tapes I had made during my sessions with Catherine. In the wee hours of the morning, I thought of my old Hungarian grandfather who had died while I was still a teenager. When I would tell him that I was afraid to take a risk, he would lovingly encourage me by repeating his favorite English expression. What the hell, he would say. What the hell?
So just take a leap of faith and forget about whatever is happening. What the hell?
Chapter 1. The first time I saw Catherine, she was wearing a vivid crimson dress and was nervously leafing through a magazine in my waiting room. She was visibly out of breath. For the previous 20 minutes, she had been pacing the corridor outside the Department of Psychiatry offices, trying to convince herself to keep her appointment with me and not run away.
So again, there is a big stigma of people going to psychiatrists. Of course, to a very large extent in the Western countries, it has gone over because it is a normally an accepted practice. In India, still, if you have told to go and visit a psychiatrist, you feel as if that you are being declared crazy, and it also puts a stamp on you, right? So naturally, people don't want to keep the appointment and run away.
I went out to the waiting room to greet her, and we shook hands. I noticed that hers were cold and damp, confirming her anxiety. Actually, it had taken her 2 months of courage gathering to make an appointment to see me, even though she had been strongly advised to seek my help by two staff physicians, both of whom she trusted. Finally, she was here.
So again, even though we are given advice and we are told by people who we trust to take this step to go into to take a psychiatric session is a really leap of faith.
Catherine is an extraordinarily attractive woman with medium length blonde hair and hazel eyes. At that time, she worked as a laboratory technician in the hospital where I was chief of psychiatry, and she earned extra money modeling swimwear. I ushered her into my office, past the couch, and to a large leather chair. We sat across from each other, my semicircular desk separating us. Catherine leaned back in her chair, silent, not knowing where to begin. I waited, preferring that she choose the opening, but after a few minutes, I began inquiring about her past. On that first visit, we began to unravel who she was and why she had come to see me. In answers to my questions, Catherine revealed the story of her life. She was the middle child, reared in a conservative Catholic family in a small Massachusetts town. Her brother, born 3 years earlier than she, was very athletic, and he enjoyed a freedom that she was never allowed. Her younger sister was the favorite of both parents. When we started to talk about her symptoms, she became noticeably more tense and nervous.
So
Her
whenever
sym-
we are talking about something uncomfortable, right, we always start getting nervous and something that we are not wanting to face, something that we are not ready to transcend at that point of time. So it will automatically make us nervous.
Her speech was rapid, and she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. Her life had always been burdened with fears. She feared water, feared choking to the extent that she could not swallow pills, feared airplanes, feared the dark, and she was terrified of dying.
So totally operating on the left side of the grid, totally operating out of fear in everything in her life.
In the recent past, her fears had begun to worsen. In order to feel safe, she often slept in the walk in closet in her apartment. She suffered 2 to 3 hours of insomnia before being able to fall asleep. Once asleep, she would sleep lightly and fitfully, awakening frequently. The nightmares and sleepwalking episodes that had plagued her childhood were returning. As her fears and symptoms increasingly paralyzed her, she became more and more depressed.
So again, sleep is a very important aspect of our lives, right? If we don't get proper sleep, our body systems will never function properly. And it can lead to depression. It can lead to various immunity system disorders. It can lead to all sorts of disorders. So it's not surprising that she is becoming more depressed because she is becoming sleep deprived.
As Catherine continued to talk, I could sense how deeply she was suffering. Over the years, I had helped many patients like Catherine through the agonies of their fears, and I felt confident that I could help her too. I decided we would begin by delving into her childhood, looking for the original sources of her problems.
So you have to get to the source of any issue to actually tackle it. This is something that we are seeing in all the issues that anyone faces. You have to come to the source. Where is the inception? You have to tackle it at the inception point.
Usually, this kind of insight helps to alleviate anxiety. If necessary, and if she could manage to swallow pills, I would offer her some mild anti anxiety medications to make her more comfortable. This was standard textbook treatment for Catherine's symptoms, and I never hesitated to use tranquilizers or even antidepressant medicines to treat chronic, severe fears and anxieties. Now I use these medicines much more sparingly and only temporarily, if at all.
So again, if we can achieve what we want to achieve without taking chemical drugs, it's always better. And this doctor has learned the hard way that using drugs may not be the only way and the actual way of helping someone heal.
No medicine can reach the real roots of these symptoms. My experiences with Catherine and others like her have proved this to me. Now I know there can be cures, not just the suppression or covering over of symptoms. During the first session, I kept trying to gently nudge her back to her childhood. Because Catherine remembered amazingly few events from her early years, I made a mental note to consider hypnotherapy as a possible shortcut to overcome this repression. She could not remember any particularly traumatic moments in her childhood. That would explain the epidemic of fears in her life.
So many times, we block memories that are hurtful, that are traumatic. We don't want to go into them again. So we create a block, we create a shield. So that could be happening to her away.
As she strained and stretched her mind to remember, isolated memory fragments emerged. When she was about 5 years old, she had panicked when someone had pushed her off a diving board into a swimming pool. She said that even before that incident, however, she had never felt comfortable in water. When Catherine was 11, her mother had become severely depressed. Her mother's strange withdrawal from the family necessitated visits to a psychiatrist, with ensuing electroshock treatments. These treatments had made it difficult for her mother to remember things. This experience with her mother frightened Catherine, but as her mother improved and became herself again, Catherine said that her fears dissipated.
So again, shock treatment can actually cure certain aspects of what is happening, but may result in some other stuff taking over. So we have to be careful when we use electroshock treatment.
Her father had a long standing history of alcohol abuse, and sometimes Catherine's brother had to retrieve their father from the local bar. Her father's increasing alcohol consumption led to his having frequent fights with her mother, who would then become moody and withdrawn. However, Catherine viewed this as an accepted family pattern.
So again, naturally, when someone is drinking alcohol, it causes all sorts of problem if you become an alcoholic. And of course, a child who is brought up in a particular environment in the beginning will consider that environment to be normal, that this is happening everywhere, right? So that's why it becomes very important for us to actually shield children from this kind of behavior, alcoholism or any kind of traumatic behavior, so that they don't carry it ahead with them. Otherwise, they start thinking this is normal and it will have a major effect on their lives.
Things were better outside the home. She dated in high school and mixed in easily with her friends, most of whom she had known for many years. However, she found it difficult to trust people, especially those outside her small circle of friends.
So, right, so the father's attitude, etc., may have caused this, right? That she couldn't trust what were the people around her.
Her religion was simple and unquestioned. She was raised to believe in traditional Catholic ideology and practices, and she had never really doubted the truthfulness and validity of her faith. She believed that if you were a good Catholic and lived properly by observing the faith and its rituals, you would be rewarded by going to heaven. If not, you would experience purgatory or hell.
So again, purgatory or hell, what we find when we are going into expanded states, purgatory or hell doesn't exist. What exists is your ability to conceive and manifest something. So when we go into these higher states of consciousness, we are entering thought responsive universes. So whatever you're thinking will start to manifest. So if you're thinking hell, that is what is going to manifest.
A patriarchal god and his son made these final decisions. I later learned that Catherine did not believe in reincarnation. In fact, she knew very little about the concept, although she had read sparingly about the Hindus. Reincarnation was an idea contrary to her upbringing and understanding. She had never read any metaphysical or occult literature, having had no interest in it. She was secure in her beliefs.
So again, like an ostrich with the head in the sand, right? You're secure with what you know. You're not allowing yourself to expand.
After high school, Catherine completed a 2-year technical program, emerging as a laboratory technician. Armed with the profession and encouraged by her brother's move to Tampa, Catherine landed a job in Miami at a large teaching hospital affiliated with the University of Miami School of Medicine. She moved to Miami in the spring of 1974 at the age of 21. Catherine's life in a small town had been easier than her life in Miami turned out to be. Yet she was glad she had fled her family problems. During her first year in Miami, Catherine met Stuart, married, Jewish, and with 2 children. He was totally different from any other man she had ever dated. He was a successful physician, strong and aggressive. There was an irresistible chemistry between them, but their affair was rocky and tempestuous. Something about him drew out her passions and awakened her as if she were charmed by him. At the time Catherine started therapy, her affair with Stuart was in its sixth year and very much alive, if not well. Catherine could not resist Stuart, although he treated her poorly, and she was furious at his lies, broken promises, and manipulations.
So she's in a toxic kind of a relationship, but she can't get out. She's stuck.
Several months prior to her appointment with me, Catherine had required vocal cord surgery for a benign nodule. She had been anxious prior to the surgery but was absolutely terrified upon awakening in the recovery room. It took hours for the nursing staff to calm her. After her recovery in the hospital, she sought out Dr. Edward Poole. Ed was a kindly pediatrician whom Catherine had met while working in the hospital. They had both felt an instant rapport and had developed a close friendship. Catherine talked freely to Ed, telling him of her fears, her relationship with Stuart, and that she felt she was losing control over her life. He insisted that she make an appointment with me and only me, not with any of my associate psychiatrists. When Ed called to tell me about his referral, he explained that for some reason he thought only I could truly understand Catherine, even though the other psychiatrists also had excellent credentials and were skilled therapists. Catherine did not call me, however. 8 weeks passed. In the crunch of my busy practice as head of the Department of Psychiatry, I had forgotten about Ed's call. Catherine's fears and phobias worsened. Dr. Frank Acker, chief of surgery, had known Catherine casually for years, and they often bantered good naturedly when he visited the laboratory where she worked. He had noticed her recent unhappiness and sensed her tension. Several times he had meant to say something to her, but had hesitated. One afternoon, Frank was driving to a smaller, out of the way hospital to give a lecture. On the way, he saw Catherine driving to her home, which was close to that hospital, and impulsively waved her to the side of the road. I want you to see Dr. Wise now, he yelled through the window. No delays. Although surgeons often act impulsively, even Frank was surprised at how emphatic he was.
So again, a download, right? And then he acted. He had to act on that download.
Catherine's panic attacks and anxiety were increasing in frequency and duration. She began having two recurrent nightmares. In one, a bridge collapsed while she was driving across it. Her car plunged into the water below, and she was trapped and drowning. In the second dream, she was trapped in a pitch black room, stumbling and falling over things, unable to find a way out. Finally, she came to see me.
So basically getting stuck in both the dreams.
At the time of my first session with Catherine, I had no idea that my life was about to turn upside down, that the frightened, confused woman across the desk from me would be the catalyst, and that I would never be the same again.
So as much as the psychiatrist heals the client also heals the psychiatrist.
Chapter 2. 18 months of intensive psychotherapy passed, with Catherine coming to see me once or twice a week. She was a good patient, verbal, capable of insights, and extremely eager to get well. During that time, we explored her feelings, thoughts, and dreams. Her recognition of recurrent behavior patterns provided her with insight and understanding. She remembered many more significant details from her past, such as her merchant seaman's father's absences from the home and his occasional violent outbursts after drinking too much. She understood much more about her turbulent relationship with Stuart, and she expressed anger more appropriately. I felt that she should have been much improved by now. Patients almost always improve when they remember unpleasant influences from their past, when they learn to recognize and correct maladaptive behavior patterns, and when they develop insight and view their problems from a larger, more detached perspective. But Catherine had not improved.
So something
Anxiety,
deeper was there.
anxiety and panic attacks still tortured her. The vivid recurrent nightmares continued, and she was still terrified of the dark, of water, and of being closed in. Her sleep was still fragmented and unrefreshing. She was experiencing heart palpitations. She continued to refuse any medicines, afraid of choking on the pills. I felt as if I had reached a wall, and that no matter what I did, that wall would remain so high that neither of us would be able to climb over it. But with my sense of frustration came an added sense of determination. Somehow I was going to help Catherine. And then a strange thing happened. Although she was intensely afraid of flying and had to fortify herself with several drinks while she was on the plane, Catherine accompanied Stuart to a medical conference in Chicago in the spring of 1982. While there, she pressured him into visiting the Egyptian exhibit at the Art Museum, where they joined a guided tour. Catherine had always had an interest in ancient Egyptian artifacts and reproductions of relics from that period. She was hardly a scholar and had never studied that time in history, but somehow the pieces seemed familiar to her. When the guide began to describe some of the artifacts in the exhibit, she found herself correcting him, and she was right. The guide was surprised. Catherine was stunned. How did she know these things? Why did she feel so strongly that she was right? So sure of herself that she corrected the guide in public? Perhaps the memories were forgotten from her childhood.
So again, downloads taking place. She's making the connection and saying stuff.
At her next appointment, she told me what had happened. Months earlier, I had suggested hypnosis to Catherine, which she was afraid and she resisted. Because of her experience at the Egyptian exhibit, she now reluctantly agreed. Hypnosis is an excellent tool to help a patient remember long forgotten incidents. There is nothing mysterious about it. It is just a state of focused concentration. Under the instruction of a trained hypnotist, the patient's body relaxes, causing the memory to sharpen. I had hypnotized hundreds of patients and had found it helpful in reducing anxiety, eliminating phobias, changing bad habits, and aiding in the recall of repressed material. On occasion, I had been successful in regressing patients back to their early childhoods, even to when they were 2 or 3 years old, thus eliciting the memories of long forgotten traumas that were disrupting their lives. I felt confident that hypnosis would help Catherine. I instructed Catherine to lie on the couch with her eyes slightly closed. I instructed Catherine to lie on the couch with her eyes slightly closed and her head resting on a small pillow. At first, we focused on her breathing. With each exhalation, she released stored up tension and anxiety. With each inhalation, She relaxed even more. After several minutes of this, I told her to visualize her muscles progressively relaxing, beginning with her facial muscles and jaw, then her neck and shoulders, her arms, back, and stomach muscles, and finally her legs. She felt her entire body sinking deeper and deeper into the couch.
So standard operating procedure. First, you need to relax before you can access these memories, etc. They're also very much like the 10th step relaxation process that we have in the excursion and in the gateway voyage.
Then I instructed her to visualize a bright white light at the top of her head inside her body. Later on, as I had the light spread slowly down her body, it completely relaxed every muscle, every nerve, every organ, all of her body, bringing her into a deeper and deeper state of relaxation and peace. She felt sleepier and sleepier, more and more peaceful and calm. Eventually, at my instruction, the light filled her body and surrounded her as well. I counted backwards slowly from 10 to 1. With each number, she entered a deeper level of relaxation. Her trance state deepened. She was able to concentrate on my voice and exclude all background noises. By the count of 1, she was already in a moderately deep state of hypnosis. The entire process had taken about 20 minutes. After a while, I began to regress her, asking her to recall memories of progressively earlier ages. She was able to talk and to answer my questions while maintaining a deep level of hypnosis. She remembered a traumatic experience at the dentist that occurred when she was 6 years old. She vividly remembered the terrifying experience at age 5 when she was pushed from a diving board into a pool. She had gagged and choked then, swallowing some water, and while talking about it, she began to gag in my office. I suggested to her that the experience was over and she was out of the water. The gagging stopped and she resumed her normal breathing. She was still in a deep trance. At age 3, the worst event of all had occurred. She remembered awakening in her dark bedroom and being aware that her father was in her room. He reeked of alcohol then, and she could smell it now. He touched her and rubbed her, even down there. She was terrified and began to cry. So he covered her mouth with his rough hand. She could not breathe. In my office on my couch 25 years later, Catherine began to sob. I felt that we had the information now, the key to the lock. I was sure that her symptoms would improve quickly and dramatically. I softly suggested to her that the experience was over, that she was no longer in her bedroom, but was resting quietly, still in a trance. The sobbing ended. I took her forward in time to her current age. I awakened her after I had instructed her by post hypnotic suggestion to remember all that she had told me. We spent the remainder of the session discussing her suddenly vivid memory of the trauma with her father. I tried to help her accept and integrate her new knowledge. She now understood her relationship with her father, his reactions to her, his aloofness, and her fear of him. She was still shaking when she left the office, but I knew the understanding she had gained was worth the momentary discomfort.
So again, an incident took place in the past, which is affecting her in the present life.
In the drama of uncovering her painful and deeply repressed memories, I had entirely forgotten to look for the possible childhood connection to her knowledge of the Egyptian artifacts. But at least she understood more about her past. She had remembered several terrifying events, and I expected a significant improvement in her symptoms. Despite this new understanding, the next week she reported that her symptoms remained intact, as severe as ever. I was surprised. I could not understand what was wrong. Could something have happened earlier than age 3? We had uncovered more than sufficient reasons for her fear of choking, of the water, of the dark, and of being trapped. And yet the piercing fears and symptoms, the uncontrolled anxiety, were all still devastating her waking moments. Her nightmares were as terrifying as before. I decided to regress her further. While hypnotized, Catherine spoke in a slow and deliberate whisper. Because of this, I was able to write down her words verbatim and have quoted Catherine directly. The ellipses represent pauses in her speech, not deletions of words nor editing on my part. However, some of the material that is repetitious is not included here. Slowly, I took Catherine back to the age of 2, but she recalled no significant memories. I instructed her firmly and clearly: go back to the time from which your symptoms arise. I was totally unprepared for what came next.
So now the symptoms can occur in a previous timeline also, right? So now what's going to happen is she shifted to that timeline when the symptoms actually started to occur, or what was that connection which was making the symptoms appear in her life.
I see white steps leading up to a building, a big white building with pillars open in front. There are no doorways. I'm wearing a long dress, a sack made of rough material. My hair is braided, long blonde hair. I was confused. I wasn't sure what was happening. I asked her what the year was, what her name was. Aronda. I am 18. I see a marketplace in front of the building. There are baskets. You carry the baskets on your shoulders. We live in a valley. There is no water. The year is 1863 BC. The area is barren, hot, and sandy. There is a well, no rivers. Water comes into the valley from the mountains. After she related more topographical details, I told her to go several years ahead in time and to tell me what she saw. There are trees and a stone road. I see a fire with cooking. My hair is blonde. I am wearing a long, coarse brown dress and sandals. I am 25. I have a girl child whose name is Cleastra. She is Rachel. Rachel is presently her niece. They have always had an extremely close relationship. It's very hot.
So this becomes important, right? So Rachel was someone else in a previous life, and now they are coming together again in this life.
I was startled. My stomach knotted and the room felt cold. Her visualizations and recall seemed so definite. She was not at all tentative. Names, dates, clothes, trees all seemed vividly. What was going on here? How could the child she had then be her niece now? I was even more confused. I had examined thousands of psychiatric patients, many under hypnosis, and I had never come across fantasies like this before, not even in dreams. I instructed her to go forward to the time of a death. I wasn't sure how to interview someone in the middle of such an explicit fantasy or memory. but I was on the lookout for traumatic events that might underlie current fears or symptoms. The events around the time of death could be particularly traumatic. Apparently, a flood or tidal wave was devastating the village. There are big waves knocking down trees. There's no place to run. It's cold. The water is cold. I have to save my baby, but I cannot. Just have to hold her tight. I drown. The water chokes me. I can't breathe, can't swallow. Salty water. My baby is torn out of my arms. Catherine was gasping and having difficulty breathing. Suddenly, her body relaxed completely and her breathing became deep and even. I see clouds. My baby is with me and others from my village. I see my brother. She was resting. This lifetime had ended. She was still in a deep trance. I was stunned. Previous lifetimes? Reincarnation? My clinical mind told me that she was not fantasizing this material, that she was not making this up. Her thoughts, her expressions, the attention to particular details, all were different from her conscious state. The whole gamut of possible psychiatric diagnosis flashed through my mind, but her psychiatric state and her character structure did not explain these revelations. Schizophrenia? No, she had never had any evidence of a cognitive or thinking disorder. She had never experienced any auditory hallucinations of hearing voices, visual hallucinations or visions while awake, or any other type of psychotic episodes. She was not delusional, nor was she out of touch with reality. She did not have multiple or split personalities. There was only one Catherine, and her conscious mind was totally aware of this. She had no sociopathic or antisocial tendencies. She was not an actress. She did not use drugs, nor did she ingest hallucinogenic substances. Her use of alcohol was minimal. She had no neurological or psychological illnesses that could explain this vivid, immediate experience while hypnotized. These were memories of some sort, but from where? My gut reaction was that I had stumbled upon something I knew very little about. Reincarnation and past life memories. It couldn't be. I told myself. My scientifically trained mind resisted it. And yet, here it was, happening right before my eyes. I couldn't explain it, but I couldn't deny the reality of it either.
So when something happens, like this, like when Robert Monroe first experienced that entity talking, he was actually a little shocked, and you can hear it in his voice in the recording. Likewise, naturally, Dr. Brian Bess was also completely taken aback by this particular experience because this is the first time that it happened to him.
Go on, I said, a little unnerved but fascinated by what was happening. Do you remember anything else? She remembered fragments of two other lifetimes. I have on a dress with black lace, and there is black lace on my head. I have dark hair with grey in it. It's AD 1756. I am Spanish. My name is Luisa, and I am 56. I'm dancing. Others are dancing too. I'm sick. I have a fever, cold sweats. Lots of people are sick. People are dying. The doctors don't know it was from the water. I took her ahead in time. I recover, but my head still hurts. My eyes and head still hurt from the fever, from the water. Many die. Later, she told me that she was a prostitute in that lifetime, but she had not relayed that information because she was embarrassed by it. Apparently, while hypnotized, Catherine could censor some of the memories she transmitted back to me. Since Catherine had recognized her niece in an ancient lifetime, I impulsively asked her if I was present in any of her lifetimes. I was curious about my role, if any, in her remembrances. She responded quickly, in contrast to the previous very slow and deliberate recall.
So many times, when we go into these altered states, we can actually start figuring out as to who was who in some other lifetime, what was our connection with that person, etc., etc. It can happen very naturally. And in the beginning, when it starts happening, it can take a toll on you, because if you start behaving with that person in that way, but that relationship is not what the relationship you have with that person in the current lifetime, then it can actually start creating problems for us.
You are my teacher sitting on a ledge. You teach us from books. You are old with grey hair. You're wearing a white dress, toga with gold trim. Your name is Diogenes. You teach us symbols, triangles. You are very wise, but I don't understand. The year is 1568 BC. This was approximately 1200 years before the noted Greek cynic philosopher Diogenes. The name was not an uncommon one. The first session had ended, even more amazing ones were yet to come. After Catherine left, and over the next several days, I pondered the details of the hypnotic regression. It was natural for me to ponder. Very few details emerging from even a normal therapy are escaped my obsessive mental analysis, and this session was hardly normal. In addition, I was very skeptical about life after death, reincarnation, outer body experiences, and related phenomena. After all, the logical part of me ruminated this could be her fantasy. I wouldn't actually be able to prove any of her assertions or visualizations. But I was also aware, although much more dimly, of a further and less emotional thought. Keep an open mind, the thought said. True science begins with observation. Her memories might not be fantasy or imagination, they might be something more than meets the eye or any of the other senses. Keep an open mind, get more data. I had another nagging thought. Would Catherine, prone to anxieties and fears to begin with, be too frightened to undergo hypnosis again? I decided not to call her. Let her digest the experience too. I would wait until next week.